Some industry experts say there are a number of challenges for the overall tourism and hospitality sector. Managing Director of HVS, Tim Smith, joins us now from our Cape Town studios to unpack this. Tim, why is it that Africa battles to have, a proper travel and tourism industry?
Well, it's a very interesting question. There are two reasons, really. One is the cost of getting here, and flights to the continent and within the continent are incredibly expensive, unfortunately. The other challenge is governmental, which is obviously led by immigration and visas and those problems. But once you've overcome those challenges, the tourists to Africa often go back to their dinner parties in North America, Europe and so on, and are very, very keen ambassadors to promote the continent.
We're seeing a booming middle class within Africa in itself, but not a lot of Africans go and travel within the continent. A lot of South Africans won't go to Kenya, for instance, or at least a sizable number that would change that country's tourism sector. How is it that we can invite each other to each other's countries so we can see a lot of economic change through tourism there?
Well, there are two key ways. One is making the transport quicker and easier, as I've just been mentioning. And the other is making sure that the hotels are aimed at the local and regional guests, both in terms of pricing, but also in terms of offering. There are many brands that are based outside Africa that have tried and failed by bringing their stereotypical hotel rooms to the continent. And those brands that really work here, such as Protea, for example, are the brands that work for Africans.
And what is it that is propping up that particular price to travel that you're talking about? I know in terms of flying out from South Africa to other places on the continent is quite costly. It doesn't make sense because the distance is shorter. Is it an infrastructure issue there?
It's a lack of competition in many places. We're very lucky here in South Africa with the number of low-cost carriers that we have. But once you leave South Africa, the number of low-cost carriers and therefore options of flights diminish greatly.
There are opportunities, though, to link tourism to other sectors in order to drive the tourism numbers up. What are those?
Well, there's this horrible word which has been invented called bleisure, which is combining business and leisure. And one of the advantages that Africa had over the years was that because flights to and from the continent were less frequent, people stayed longer and had weekends to explore the local environments and so on. So I think that is something that is really opportunistic. And I think that people really want to do business. So with the economic cooperation and visa cooperations in East Africa, West Africa and Southern Africa, then that will encourage people to travel. And then when they get there, they'll enjoy all the pleasures and experiences that the local market has to offer.
Other than getting a visa on arrival in a particular African country, what are some of the policies that could be eased in order to make sure that people, find it easier to come into the continent?
Well, it's not really a policy, but I think it's worth highlighting the perception of security. And I think being an Englishman 5 years ago, sitting in London, saying I was bringing my young family to South Africa, there were still a lot of people who thought the worst would happen to us. But in reality, we walk wherever we like, and we have a very, very good life here. So I believe presidents meeting on the world stage and encouraging others to come and visit really make a big difference. When Obama and the Pope both visited Mombasa, they suddenly announced that area was safe and travel advisories were open again. So that area of Kenya suddenly started to boom again. So It's a real perception more than an actual policy.
Well, let's hope that perception of a dark continent ends then. Tim, that was Managing Director of HVS, Tim Smith.